Leaked emails show that so-called British leftist Paul Mason, who called for state monitoring of disinformation, created a Putin influence map, waged a war on anti-imperialist activists, campaign groups, independent journalists, and media sites, and tried to get the Grayzone, an independent news website, deplatformed. The emails show him allegedly plotting with Andy Price of the UK Foreign Office Counter-Disinformation and Media Unit.
According to the Grayzone, Mason pitched a Putin proxy watch project guided by, quote, InfoWar experts to attack bad actors in the UK. Mason also called for suspending UK libel law to smear targets and a special effects-driven project to sensationalize Russian atrocities. But when the Grayzone covered the story on YouTube, their video, a conversation between Max Blumenthal, the editor of the Grayzone, and host of The Pushback Show, airing on the Grayzone, Aaron Mate, which feature was removed, put back up, and then removed again.
Blumenthal said YouTube censored the conversation on the basis of harassment and bullying, and that they assume the pressure came from the same elements seeking to ruin them. Joining us now to weigh in is host of the Katie Halper Show podcast, Katie Halper. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Katie, help us understand what's going on here. So the Grayzone tried to cover a story about a kind of misinformation effort and then themselves got deplatformed for covering that story?
Yeah, it's pretty scary because what we see is this journalist, Paul Mason, who positions himself as a leftist, who basically, it seems like what he's doing now is dedicating himself to pushing, promoting NATO. In fact, he wants any Labour politician who suggests that NATO had any role in the current proxy war between Russia and the United States and NATO countries and Russia. He wants them to be kicked out of the Labour Party. He openly calls for things like state and community action to challenge the lies of its own pro-Kremlin fringe. He wrote at the New Statesman, he wrote a piece called Empower the People to Win the War on Disinformation. The left should champion state and community action to challenge the lies of its own pro-Kremlin fringe. So he really is quite authoritarian and censorious, and that's the way that he tries to counter information that he doesn't like. And we know that because he can't actually counter them on, on substance. And so what we know now is that there are these leaked emails that show Mason talking to various people, including mostly Emil Khan. Now, Emil Khan himself is the founder of Valiant Projects, which is funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And its goal is to investigate disinformation. So we see in this leaked correspondence between Khan and Mason that Mason is laying out what he thinks should be done about the Grayzone. And so he suggests things like relentless deplatforming, as with PayPal. And of course, that's a reference to cutting off WikiLeaks news sites like Consortium News and Mint Press from PayPal, which is also a very disturbing thing that people of all political colors should be disturbed by. But he suggests doing that, deplatforming. And what's interesting is he says in this email exchange that they shouldn't try to go toe-to-toe with the Grayzone, which shows once again how they cannot engage in any kind of dialogue or debate on the facts or on the substance. They have to resort to these smear tactics. And we see that Khan was talking about bringing members, elements of the British state to these meetings because they wanted to have a meeting like victims of the Grayzone, as Kit Clarenberg, who wrote this expose for the Grayzone, as he calls it, like the Grayzone Memorial Foundation or something. And it's just amazing because these are the very people who are trying to smear people like the Grayzone. And then when the Grayzone just does a factual YouTube stream on this, they are deplatformed. They're the ones who are silenced, even though what they're doing is they're exposing bad faith characters. And somehow they're the ones who get in trouble.
Explanation from YouTube about why they've been deplatformed?
Bullying and harassment. And I watched the entire stream because the entire stream, well, two things. One is full disclosure, as people probably know, I co-host Useful Idiots with Aaron Mate, who's also at the Grayzone. But here's a little sneak preview that on Friday we will be releasing an interview that we did with Max Blumenthal, where we have the discussion that was basically, hopefully it'll survive YouTube censorship, but we have a discussion about similar issues that were censored by YouTube. the only explanation is bullying and harassment. And I saw the original stream that they did, which is now taken down from YouTube. There's no bullying or calls for harassment. There's just an expose of the truth. And what you have with these people who are, again, they're censorious, they're bullies, they're harassing. I mean, we see in these emails, these leaked emails, they're literally calling for harassment and bullying and deplatforming and smearing. And these are the people who are rewarded, and the people who are trying to speak truth to power are the ones who are punished. And it's really, everyone should be up in arms about this, regardless of your political orientation. It's a really scary moment of a kind of state-sponsored silencing and smearing. And these have real implications. I mean, the Grayzone and other outlets like the Grayzone, there aren't that many, but other, let's say, shows, what they're doing is they are questioning the very pro-NATO narrative that I would argue, is leading to a proxy war with Ukraine, a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, which is sacrificing the lives of Ukrainians. And we know from recent revelations from the Biden campaign itself, the Biden administration, that they are worried that the sanctions are backfiring, the sanctions that they imposed on Russia. And also, they're not interested in negotiation. We know that. They've said that. They don't want to tell Ukraine what to do, which is laughable, as if the United States doesn't specialize in telling other countries what to do or force other countries what to do. It's just that they want this war to keep going because of the arms industry and because they want to damage Putin as much as possible. I mean, Lloyd Austin himself admitted that the goal of this war was to damage Putin. It wasn't to actually do anything about democracy or protect Ukrainians. If they wanted to protect Ukrainians, they'd be using their significant sway. I mean, we're talking about the United States to force negotiations, and they'd be using diplomacy instead of just sacrificing the lives of Ukrainians. So it's what we are seeing is a very pro-war agenda that's being supported ultimately by YouTube, by the British government, obviously the U.S. government, elements like Mason. And in fact, I don't know if you have the map. We should maybe look at the map. Do you guys have it? Because it's kind of like A Beautiful Mind meets the woman in Homeland. It looks kind of insane. I'll just tell you.
I got both those references. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
So it's like A Beautiful
both
Mind
characters
without
who
the
are
intelligence.
crazy.
Right. But at least in The Beautiful Mind, he's a genius. And I guess that Claire Danes' character in Homeland is supposed to be smart also. But this would be like that, but without the smartness, without the intelligence. So all it is pure crazy. And if you see this weird, maniacal, obsessive map shows on things like the Black community, the Muslim community, Scottish nationalists, or just Scottish people in general. These are the potential victims of Russian and Chinese disinformation. And
I can't read what it says from this distance, but that's pretty.
Yeah, you can trust me. I'm not lying. So that's what it says. Yeah. And other people who are alleged, bad actors include Medea Benjamin, which is just absolutely laughable. Sorry, I keep saying laughable today because it's like if we don't laugh at it, it's just really disturbing. But the Medea Benjamin from Code Pink is supposed to be part of this Putin influence map, and Code Pink and Medea Benjamin have condemned the war. They've condemned Russia. They just make their crime is actually suggesting that the United States should be using diplomacy again instead of using Ukrainians as cannon fodder in this proxy war. But again, that gets you into trouble with Paul Mason.
Yeah, I think this is another great example of how so many terms of bullying and harassment are being just absolutely weaponized in bad faith by people who want to silence people they disagree with, and that it's and then when they send their supporters after when people in the mainstream media criticize you, draw negative attention to you, get some kind of pile-on against you, that's portrayed as accountability and justified, and just the process of engaging in dialogue, and sure, fine, which I actually I agree with. Sometimes people deserve criticism and they're going to get it, and you're not responsible for every nasty, or if it escalates, some follower of yours does something. But then the other side, when those people are subjected to criticism, and when people get a little nasty with them, they use like attack on our democracy, attack on the media kind of language in just utterly hypocritical, utterly bad faith.
Yeah, they cry victim when they're the ones who are doing the literal deplatforming, literal smearing, the bullying, and And they're trying to, again, do it through smears, not through substance. Another interesting revelation from these emails is that they call Bellingcat intelligence by proxy, which is funny because Bellingcat claims to be a totally independent, open source journalism collective. But people who have followed their work, know that they're not quite that. And in fact, they seem to be acting frequently with state entities. They have access to things that you wouldn't be able to get through open source hacking or anything. But that's kind of a side story. But now Bellingcat is really mad at Paul Mason because these leaked emails show that he perceives them to be working with state actors. So they're like making fun of him on Twitter as this boomer who doesn't know how to use password protections. So that part is kind of amusing.
Yeah. Well, we've obviously dealt here on the show with some YouTube enforcement issues that we were not totally thrilled about.
Taken down. Let's hope this doesn't get censored.
Yes, hopefully it will not. Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.